All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Glass and Iron podcast. My name is David Clapp, and this is
Spencer Peterson.
And today we'll be talking about a few things. We don't exactly have much of a plan, but something. We'll be talking about our life stories, specifically events regarding the topic of the day. And hopefully we'll be able to bring you all a bit of hope through this. I have a list of to cover. Time, nothing that is like I don't have anything scripted, for example, but I do have that list. I have more or less a plan.
Okay. Yeah.
What a beautiful start. All right, well, I guess I wasn't really sure like if we should start with our own stories or what. Generally speaking, I tend to be more reactive. But
right. Yeah, and reactive is good, but proactive is another thing. So that's what's going to make this project difficult. So as a class, we've kind of been working on creating a little campaign for CWI and the Treasure Valley in general, where we're looking at suicide prevention, since it's such a big deal that even though it is gaining traction, it's not really where it needs to be.
Right. I think that's the, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that suicide is the number 10 cause of death in the U.S.,
Mm-hmm.
and it's number 2 amongst youth, particularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big deal. It doesn't get talked about near as much as it should, and I think a lot of that has to do with the stigma that comes with it. When you're looking at, a lot of people think it's either fake or just, looking to get attention, and that's kind of problematic because it's hard to understand when you haven't been a part of it.
I think it also makes a lot of people pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, like in conversation, what exactly do you say about it? It's not the easiest thing to talk about.
Right, yeah. And that's why it's become such a big deal right now, is because, you look at campaigns like Seize the Awkward, and they talk about, finding those awkward moments to talk about when somebody hasn't been looking the way or acting the way they normally do. Because symptoms of depression and those kinds of things, when there are mental health issues, are not as visible as if you were sick physically.
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people do try to hide them.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that varies from person to person as to why, but I don't know whether you don't want to be a burden or if you just want to maybe try and protect your pride a little bit. It's interesting. There are actually, at least in the mind, usually there are more reasons not to share than to share, even if to share. That reason is actually much more important.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'll help, but it seems easier in the moment not to.
And when you're in the mindset that you are willing to take your own life, you have to look at, there's definitely something wrong, because instinctually you want to live. Your body wants you to live. So it's not just a phase or just something that, they'll get over it. Because once they make that decision, if it happens, it's done.
Right. Right. And a lot of people, when they do actually commit it, it's often more of like some people do premeditate it. They think things through and they prepare for it, but others, it tends to be much more of a spur of the moment decision.
Mm-hmm.
Seen often when like something happens that they don't think there's any way out of their current predicament, and so it may seem like the only option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really the biggest issue, is the fact that you feel disconnected enough from people, and it hurts so much that you can't see a way out of it.
Well, it's not just that either. I mean, that's certainly it for a lot of people, and it's often an aspect in that, feeling very disconnected, but it can also be they feel very trapped. It's not only that you're disconnected, but you get the impression you're going to stay disconnected, or or that whatever other problems that are mounting, there's just nothing that can be done for them.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of experienced differently by everybody, which makes it even more difficult to
Mm.
to work with because there's so many medications and stuff that even I've personally tried, and they'll work for a while. Sometimes they won't work at all, and then you're just kind of stuck. So it kind of feels like an endless loop when you're in the middle of it.
Mm. I've never actually taken medication.
Yeah, medications for antidepressants and anti-anxiety, which can also be either a cause or a side effect of having depression, are very fickle because they're working from a chemical standpoint. And really, at least for me, the most effective things have been on the onset of taking those medications, because you take those medications and eventually you build up a tolerance to that chemical. So those chemical imbalances then start to even out and come back. Some people, it works for just the whole time, but at least in my experience, finding that is months of, it's really rough because you're dealing with the side effects of new medication and trying to deal with your own feelings. So I had to do a lot of counseling while being on those, because you really need someone to talk to that maybe you don't see every day, somebody that you feel that you can trust
Mm.
and that you can give everything to. And sometimes that's just too difficult to do with somebody that you know.
Yeah, yeah. I was never really the sort to share
Hmm.
either, like in general.
Hmm.
Um, I never did go to counseling or anything like that. I
Hmm.
guess that probably could have helped, but I was always a bit afraid that would be like a blotch on my record.
Yeah, it really isn't. People go to
No?
counseling all the time, and there are lots of people now that either don't think a depression is a thing or just don't know enough about it, that may even have it themselves. And just like it feels different once you have that diagnosis. Having a name to it is freeing in a sense, but it's also kind of a shackle.
Hmm.
So, I mean, having someone you can talk to that isn't with you all the time, that you can feel you can trust, whether it's a friend or a professional counselor, is extremely helpful. And it's definitely worth a try. But not every counselor is going to work for you. You have to find somebody who you feel comfortable talking to. So that's another kind of explorative phase, um, that you go through when you're dealing with things like that, is talking to people.
Right. There are a lot of steps hard to get that done instantly, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, that's the big thing. Is like Robin Williams said, that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and it's really really hard to see that in the middle of it. And so dealing with those feelings and trying to stay in a sane state of mind is really really difficult.
Hmm. What if you don't mind me asking, what got you to that place to begin with?
Yeah, so um I had actually been depressed for a really really long time, and I
Hmm.
didn't realize it until probably the end of my freshman year of high school. um by that point, it wasn't like things were going downhill situationally. I don't have a bad family. My parents are very loving and involved enough for me to feel good. But it I felt I realized that things that I thought were boredom, where it was just like an extreme emptiness, were actually depression that I'd been dealing with for a long time.
Hmm.
Losing interest in those things that I loved, playing video games, hanging out with friends, any of those kinds of things. I had lost all interest in doing any of those, and I was just sleeping all day. It was either sleeping or at school because I had to be there. So at that point, my parents took me to a doctor, and we ended up starting medications. And for about 3 years, I was going in and out of different medications. And my junior year, I attempted to take my life. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it was unsuccessful. And honestly, I'm happy that it was, because getting through those feelings is extremely empowering. I still have my bad days, but even having depression, I probably wouldn't change it, because it gives me an understanding of people when they're having a really rough time. It helps me understand what they're going through and be able to empathize with them. And that's really important to me, because I want to be there for people like people were there for me.
I think that's I'm with you on that. I think that's actually very valuable. I don't think, because a lot of people can help, but few are more immediately helpful than people who have been through a similar situation and can understand to an extent what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very, not necessarily uplifting, but in some sense encouraging.
Yeah. Having the ability to have an interpersonal relationship with somebody that you can call is extremely helpful. It's not always the fix, but it is definitely something that is needed. You need that support group. You need those people in your life that are willing to just sit down with you and listen. As you get everything off your chest. When you're in the middle of those difficult thoughts, it's important to, get help immediately rather than sitting and ruminating with it, because that only gets you farther into it. What about you? How did your feelings start, and where are you kind of at now?
Well, that is an interesting question. So, my thing's actually on a basic level, it could be said to be pretty simple, but I suppose I tend to make most things pretty complicated. When I was quite a bit younger, generally speaking, rather than just starting out with things like that, I did come upon a time where I didn't have as much interest in things that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
But I had heard bits of advice which said that when you're in that position, force yourself to do things that you used to enjoy. That could be kind of helpful, and so I did that, and that did help. When I was young, I didn't, because I used to be in social groups, but then over time I withdrew from those, and I was in an online school. So most of my youth was actually spent pretty much alone.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, and when it's just you and it's just your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can go to different topics, but I get the impression most people who take the time to do that, to think just on their own and subjects, and to feel kind of isolated. I mean, you see that in Buddhism. Say you're going to have to go through that before you reach enlightenment, because they sit down, they think about these things for prolonged periods. But when I got a bit older, and I was still mostly just on my own, because I wanted to share. To an extent, I did want to share, but I found that very difficult to do. Because I have a family of, I'm in a family of four. There's myself, there's my dad, there's an older sister, mine 4 years my senior, and there's my mom. Mom is very understanding, but, well, I say that's a bit contrary. She's very kind, but she doesn't actually tend to understand most mental issues or things that I've mentioned before. She's very sympathetic, but not quite empathetic. And my sister, she's been going through her own things as well. It's it's like you may want to share, but I was always concerned about being a burden. I didn't want to place my issues on someone else, so I insisted that I would take care of them myself. And me and my dad were not exactly estranged, but we're not great friends.
Mhm.
So, while I never had straightforward depression, I did feel very down, but I didn't have straightforward depression. I did have other issues which gave me some trouble. I didn't do that great in school because I have ADHD, and I was in a position that was basically an honors program. So since I had to be the one to keep myself in line, and that just wasn't happening, I wound up not doing that great. And it's kind of weird in a way. Over time, you get more used to things going wrong if they keep going wrong until you just kind of expect them to, and you don't even worry about it as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, when eventually, because I did eventually get to a point where I was genuinely thinking about suicide, and I ever tried to take my own life. Because no matter where my thoughts went, I did always have something to cling to. Eventually, I wanted to make stories like books or films, and I was dead set that would help other people. So I refused to ever give up on that.
Yeah.
But when I was there, when I was at the lowest that I've ever sunk, boy, that was a very difficult time. Forced myself to do things that could keep myself going, even though they didn't always work that well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's often not considered, but it's often brought up in conversation that if you do take your own life, then you're going to hurt everyone around you. Well, I was so isolated, not that I didn't have anyone, but I was actually almost enamored with the idea that if I did that, to some extent, I'd be getting some degree of attention. I'd almost be striking back at the people who aren't paying attention to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it said that guilting doesn't tend to help.
No, it makes it much worse.
Indeed.
That is something that people who haven't experienced it say all the time. You hear, "Oh, it's so selfish," and they're right. But I think that Dan gives a really good point that he's heard before, where it's like you're holding on to a metal bar, and that metal bar is heating up, and below you is a drop that is going to kill you and the people below you that are holding on to you. There's only so long that you can hold on to it. It's not about you're making that decision in order to be selfish. It's about you're in such despair that you can't keep holding on. And that's the really difficult part for a lot of people to understand when they don't feel those feelings, is that you're not doing it to spite them necessarily. It's because it's too difficult. But the thing is, they're also right when they say it does get better. It does. Everyone still has those days, and everybody who deals with it has times or periods of time that it's going to be really difficult again. It does come back a lot of times, but it's not permanent. And building that resilience is essential in order for you to understand yourself and understand that that is not the right plan of action, and that there are days that will make it worth it. There is an immense capacity for joy that comes with that deep sorrow. Because, life isn't perfect. And it's not just another, oh, you're feeling sad, but it is not permanent.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, as of right now, how do you feel?
Better.
Better?
Better.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, over time things do get easier. when I was younger, I would actually tend to write a lot about these issues,
Hmm.
and not messages directly to me, but I'd always write what I wanted to hear.
Hmm.
Way later, I actually went back and read those, and it was almost fascinating because it really was. At that point, it felt like I was talking to myself because I'd gone in a full blown loop. I'd gotten better, and then I got worse again,
Hmm.
and I was coming back around because it can be cyclic.
Hmm.
If there's one thing that has defined all of these periods, though, they do each get better. None of them
Yeah,
have stayed dark forever.
yeah, and that's one thing that's difficult to see when you are back at the bottom. Is it
Mm-hmm.
just feels like it does feel like it's permanent, but it never is, and it won't be unless you make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, I still have times where it's awful, but the more I work with it, the stronger I get. Building that resilience, forcing yourself to do just the bare minimum can be very taxing, but you can feel the strength that you gain from it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I mean, like you say, no problem is permanent. Like if you do go and take your own life, that's you said permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's also the worst possible scenario.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's one problem to a much greater problem. But every problem will eventually pass. Every storm has to eventually blow out, and everything will find a resolution. It just takes time.
Hmm.
I've heard it said that one of the main deciding factors in this is maturity, but I don't think that's necessarily true.
I
It
don't
can be
think
an
it is.
aspect in youth, sure, but
Um, I do know that when I was younger, it felt worse,
mm-hmm,
because it's almost like with age, you know how time feels shorter
mm-hmm,
because you have more of a reference point. It's kind of like that, but for me, it's more of like a roller coaster. You go on the same roller coaster 30 times and it doesn't hit you as hard each time. And that's really, really helpful to me because it gives me hope that, even with those bad times, it never feels as bad as it did that first time.
mm-hmm.
And having that higher floor gives me kind of a baseline that helps me know this is how I can help myself snap out of it. And it feels like it's shorter each time. And that's really, really nice.
That's good. That's that's very good. I like your roller coaster analogy.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, no, it does get easier.
it's difficult to deal with, but again, I wouldn't change it for the world because the empathy I feel for people is so much greater when I see they're having a hard time. And right now with the stay-at-home orders and everything going on, it's it's really a tough time for everyone, but especially for those with mental illness because you get to feel cooped up and you lose kind of that motivation to go out and do those things that might make you feel better, and doing those things is really, really essential to keeping yourself at a good point. So right now, especially, self-care is extremely important, and I need to follow that advice. I need to go and take walks again. I need to work out again, get those endorphins going, and do things that are going to take me out of that comfort zone and build my resilience, because your emotional resilience is kind of like a rubber band. You stretch it and it goes back. And then you can stretch it farther and it goes back. And it keeps going. And so building up yourself is one of the biggest things you can do. Whether it's doing something you enjoy, like writing, or playing video games, or something that you used to enjoy that'll give you some good memories. You know, those are extremely important to your mental health, because sitting by yourself, left alone with your thoughts, can be one of the most difficult things to handle. So don't.
Right. I have, because I've asked before, like other people who've been in this position. And one of the biggest bits of advice is get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone. I started taking walks, and that has actually been really nice. Getting out, seeing the sun. It's nice. It's nice to get some fresh air, chat with people on the road.
Yeah, it definitely is. Whether it even requires social interaction is not part of the point. It's doing things that you don't necessarily normally do. And eventually that becomes a routine, and maybe you need to find something new. But there's so many things to do in this world, even in quarantine, that can get you just a little bit out of your comfort zone. You don't have to go all the way, just a little bit. That can help you feel better.
Right. Try to grow a little bit.
Yeah, try something new. Try a new hobby that you never thought you'd enjoy, you know? I never thought I'd like working on cars. I thought it was just stupid. Now that I've tried it a little bit, I want to do more of that. So even if you're not having those hard feelings, finding a new hobby when there's nothing else to do can be really liberating, because as you do more things, you'll become more filled out as a person, whether it's by your skills or mentally or emotionally, and it makes you feel more fulfilled in life.
Right, and I took up drawing. Not a master class, but it's always nice to see things come together.
Yeah.
I know journals, keeping journals, that's helped a lot of people to discuss their thoughts, even if it's just on the page.
Yeah.
Blogs, simple things, a lot of things you can do.
Journals are really, really helpful. Going back and looking at days that may have been hard or days that were really good. Sorry, I've got the hiccups. Is really interesting and reflective. And another thing that's important is non-judgmental self-observation. Seeing what you're doing, understanding what you're doing wrong, but not beating yourself up over it. You know, looking at the bigger picture as if you were looking at a family member or a friend or somebody else. You know, not judging yourself, but understanding what's going on within you is extremely important.
Right. And when I look back at the things that I wrote, like journal like from back then, I always notice two different things. One is that things were worse back then, no matter how I feel now. And two is that I feel like I might have gone downhill. I've actually gotten better with the skills that I've been using, despite what I might think or feel about it.
Yeah.
Like things are objectively, seemingly better now, even though it may not feel like it.
Yeah, because you can write things down, and look at them and forget them, because hindsight is 20/20. So when you look at it from the outside, it's much easier to understand that wasn't the end of everything, and that you are better now. So journaling, having scheduled things, and also getting a little bit out of your comfort zone. Those are all things that can be really helpful.
and share with people. If you have problems that you haven't mentioned, not just in your head, but things outside that are bringing serious grief, bring them up. Don't just sit on that. Because if you don't do anything about it, it'll only get worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Sitting with your thoughts is good sometimes, but it's not good when it's bad thoughts. And so training your mind to steer towards the good that can come out of it is something that is really difficult to do and comes with time. So as far as what you're doing right, like over the past 3 weeks or so that we've been on a stay-at-home order, what have you been finding to do that has made you feel better?
Well, ironically, school, writing, drawing, anything that I can finish. It always gives me a big boost whenever I get anything done and can look at it and say, yeah, that's done. Finished it. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Anything with an ending is I've been trying to focus on things such as that. Anything like that is helpful for me.
Checking things off a list. Yeah.
What about you?
For me, I've kind of been just coasting for the moment. You know, like I said, it's been kind of tough on everybody. I've been trying to find new things to do. So right now, I'm kind of in a little bit of a rut with that, but I'm finding more and more things to do as far as like getting back on that horse of doing things that I enjoy. And right now, I'm kind of looking at what else can I do to feel better, because I've really just been going to work, coming home, maybe watching some TV, and going to sleep. And I know that that's not healthy. So I'm looking for more things that will build me up.
Well, I mean, there are options. As there, because if there's ever been something that you were thinking of doing or that you kind of wanted to do that didn't involve going out, now would be a perfect time for that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, like last week, my wife and I, we marathoned all the Fast and Furious movies. We would watch them every night, one every night after I got home from work or whatever. And that was a really enjoyable time, and we both found something fun in it. So it was really nice to enjoy something together with somebody else without having to go out and spend a ton of money or having to, you know, really look for other things to do.
Right. Right. As long as you enjoy it. Passing time. Eventually, this too shall pass as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll make it through.
But a weird time. Who would have thought toilet paper would become such a commodity?
Yeah. It's crazy the problems that we create on the road to avoid them. You know, like a lot of people went and panic bought things, which was not the smart thing to do. You know, you're creating that problem by going and trying to stock that up. Whether it's for yourself or for other people, going out of your way to find a way to avoid that problem oftentimes just it meets you there.
Right. Needs to be confronted in some sense. Avoiding things is a great way to let them grow.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to mental health, sometimes the only way through is to actually go through it. You can't go around it. But that doesn't mean that you have to let it take you all the way down. Because there's always something you can do that'll allow you to feel just a little bit better.
Right. Right. There's always some kind of an option available.
Hmm.
I mean, if there's no one there to talk to, you can make a phone call. Suicide prevention line is there. Counseling is usually going to be an option.
Hmm.
And even if that's not, there are still things that you can do. Go outside, or if you're already doing that, try something new, get out of your comfort zone. There's always something. There's never no option at all.
No. There are so many things in the world that there's always an option, and all you have to do is look a tiny bit. It doesn't take that much looking to find something new, but it does take a bit of effort on your part.
Right. Right. And then, of course, you've got to do it.
Yeah.
Because if you just notice it, that's not going to help that much.
Mm-hmm. Holding yourself accountable to the things that you say you're going to do is essential to not only getting things done, but finding things you enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's always something to do.
Yeah. So what other points did you have?
Smallest. I think we've already exhausted them.
Okay.
Is there anything that you wanted to mention?
Something really cool that's been happening is that with everyone having to stay at home and work from home or whatever, a lot of things have been moving online faster than they were before. So you look at counseling, there's a lot of options now that weren't available before this, that you can go online to get counseling, or you can go online and talk to your doctor, and have that connection even when you feel like you're alone. So I think it's a great thing that's come out of an awful thing, is that now many more people have access, because there's a lot of people who are either disabled or so debilitated by their feelings that they can't even get in the car and drive to an appointment.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's good. It's good that we have those options now.
Mm-hmm. So, as far as hobbies in general, what do you do that makes you feel any better? Obviously, there's writing.
Oh, yeah.
There's
So outside of
walks.
that, and school and walks and all that, I watched a bit of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the people who talk there, play games, keep up a cheery attitude. I know it's a bit silly at times, but like Game Grumps, Jacksepticeye, it's nice to get a laugh once in a while. That's often very uplifting.
Yeah, there you go. Laughter is great medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's just something stupid that you feel embarrassed for laughing at, that's a great thing, you know?
Right. Like if it got you to laugh, that's enough. That's worth it.
Yeah. So I mean, having those multiple things to do is really nice, because then you have options. And just a few options, not enough to be overwhelming, is a great thing to have, because it gives you a choice and it makes you feel so much more empowered to make that choice. You know, people often run away if it's the only option. You know,
Right.
you feel like you're back doing core, and the only thing to do is the thing you most don't want to do.
Right. And so off you go.
Yeah. So you go the other way.
Fight. Right.
Yeah.
Thus the problem grows. And one thing did actually occur to me while we were sitting here. I suppose for some people, some of these tricks won't seem to work as well. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with you if that doesn't necessarily seem to help. Like, try to find something else. If one thing doesn't work, then jump to another. Probably something will, even if it's not what you're currently focusing on.
Mhm.
It's like how you need to find the right counselor. They
Mhm.
won't all fit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's different kinds of depression, and a lot of people don't realize that. There's depression that comes from a situation where something happens, the death of a family member, or something else, just it feels like nothing is going right. And that's a kind of depression that is going to need to be treated by communication and honesty with the people around you, or somebody who is going to listen and not judge you like a counselor. And then there's chemical imbalances. And those can happen for a multitude of reasons, whether it's hormone imbalances through puberty, or because just something isn't producing properly in your body. And those are the kinds that you need antidepressants for. So,
Right.
Really getting in contact with a doctor that isn't just going to give you pills and is going to genuinely pay attention to what you're saying and give you the best advice on where to go from there is where you need to go if you do feel that way.
Right.
And that's another thing that's gotten a stigma, is understanding when it's something that you can help yourself with and when it's something that you can't, because a lot of people are afraid to take pills because of a stigma or religious reasons or whatever, and that's okay. You don't have to take pills, but doing something is always better than nothing.
Right. Right. It's like weeds. If you don't pull them at some point, then you're just going to get more.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, your whole yard's overrun.
Yeah. And I did say that sitting with your thoughts isn't the best course of action a lot of the time, but that's also partially not true. One thing that's really helpful for me is meditation. Doing things that are simple, not necessarily mindless, but simple enough that you're following something and using that as a way to just let everything out, having an outlet. So, before the stay-at-home order, I had been working on watercolors and just seeing where those take me while I was having a tough time. And that's been really a meditative thing. Meditation is a really interesting thing because you hear it and so many people just look it over. But really, when you look at any of the religions out there, whether you follow them or not, Christianity, Jesus talked about pondering, and that's really a meditation thing, sitting there, thinking through it, and sitting there in complete silence, alone with that, thinking through it and where to go from there and what the right choice to make is one thing he talked about. Obviously, in Buddhism and Hinduism, meditation is a big thing. There's a lot of other religions that have those things in there. So clearing your head and letting your mind take you in a natural direction and making sure to pull yourself out when you're going down in that meditation is really strengthening to your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even have to be just sitting there in meditation. Like I said, it can be those activities that are just taking you in whatever direction. Find something to latch onto and work through it.
Right. Sometimes it's kind of like a prolonged distraction. Other times, it is good to think a bit and understand to an extent what you're where you're going through things through. Not always, but like journaling. That's very, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to write it down, you have to think of it in some capacity.
Right.
So a lot of this is very situational. Like, what are you doing while you're thinking it through? Are you just wallowing, or are you doing something to help yourself in the future, or something about that now?
Yeah.
But they're always.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Wallowing. There's a big difference between wallowing and meditating.
Yes.
You can sit and focus on those negative thoughts, or you can let your mind flow. Now, what were you going to say?
Oh dear. It may be gone forever. I'm not sure. I think it was I know. I think I was going to say that, like, there are always good roads and bad roads.
Mm-hmm.
Good decisions, bad decisions, where you are. Good ways to do things and bad ways to do things. So try and measure that before you take an action. I don't know. Just think things through.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, if you're in the middle of a crisis, you definitely need to talk to someone.
Yes.
But if you're not quite at the bottom and you're going to be okay just sitting there and thinking through it, and and you can help yourself get out of that rut instead of wallowing in it, putting yourself above it, taking your mind off of what you're feeling right now in a way that allows you to go through it. That's really helpful.
Right. That's probably a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Self-help. A lot of some people can do that. A lot of people can't. It's a very strange line to be drawn. Sometimes you can help yourself quite effectively. Other times it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I struggle with is understanding what self-help or self-care is, and the best explanation I've heard is that there's not one definition for it. It's what makes you feel fulfilled in that moment.
I guess it makes sense. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, because again, everybody is different. Everybody experiences things differently. And so if you need to talk to people, do that. If you need to put on a face mask and take a bath, do that. If what gets to you is going out and skateboarding and focusing on a physical activity, that's another great thing to do. Things like that, where does it make you fulfilled in that moment? Does it make you feel successful? That's where you need to go.
Right. I mean, there are so many options.
Mm-hmm.
Riding, snowboarding, like you said, skateboarding, watching a movie. If it makes you happy in the moment and it doesn't make things worse in the long run, like maybe don't kill somebody.
Right. Yeah.
Then it's probably not the worst decision you could make.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Just doing something, not nothing, is important. Yeah.
Right.
So,
was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we should be okay. If there's anything you need to talk to me about, you know where to reach me right here.
Right.
And
in the chat box just below.
Yeah, and I will get to you as soon as physically possible. I do work, so I can't do it right in that moment. But I can tell you that. Yeah, I can tell you that I will get to you within 8 hours.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully you all either enjoyed that or got something out of it. I sincerely hope that we could have helped in some regard. Maybe you'll take some of our advice. Maybe not. Maybe the stories will be comforting. I don't know. But if you got anything out of it all, then it was worth the time. Thank you all very much for tuning in. This has been David Clapp.
And Spencer Peterson.
See you possibly never or sooner. Who knows?